Welcome back, Defenders. On Friday, Trump and Putin met in Alaska, and Trump and Putin did agree upon this. Trump is backing Putin's Ukraine land plan. On Friday, Putin was able to convince Trump the fastest way for this war to end is not sanctions on Russia, because Russia will just keep fighting. The fastest way for this war to end is if Ukraine capitulates. If Ukraine just surrenders more of their territory to Russia, then maybe the war will be over. Who knows? Putin is lying to Trump, but Trump likes this idea of a quick resolution. He just wants the war over with. So over the weekend, Trump was putting out tweets such as this. President Zelensky of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Trump didn't say it directly, but he was retweeting other people saying it. Ukraine must be willing to lose some territory to Russia. Otherwise, the longer the war goes on, they will keep losing even more land. It's worth reminding everyone that Russia controls less of Ukraine today than they did 3 years ago. That is how poorly they have performed on the battlefield. But this is what Trump wants. He wants a quick solution, and the Russians told him that if Ukraine pulls out of just Donetsk, then maybe they can start the process for a ceasefire or peace talks. For the last 8 months, the Russians have been demanding all of Donetsk, all of Zaporizhia, and all of Kherson. So the compromise is, what if Ukraine just gave the Russians all of Donetsk? This is probably close to 1 million people between Pokrovsk, Konstantinivka, Kramatorsk, Sloviansk. But this belt of cities, this is the shield protecting the rest of Ukraine. This is a trap. Trump doesn't care, but this is what the Russians want. If the Russians can somehow just be given all of these cities along this road, then there's nothing really behind it. It's mostly just farms and open fields. If the Russians can get past Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, they can then have a real breakthrough, threaten the city of Dnipro, threaten the city of Kharkiv, threaten Zaporizhia from the north. This is all the Russians are trying to do, but Trump's not going to understand that. So this was the fear going into Monday. Trump said, I'm going to meet Zelensky at the White House on Monday. And given what happened the last time Zelensky went to the White House, yes, everyone was concerned. But here's the good news. Europe showed up. Europe was not going to let Trump bully Zelensky and try and get him to surrender more territory. So I'm going to take a moment and just thank these incredible people. Thank you so much, the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of Finland, the President of France, the Prime Minister of Italy, the Chancellor of Germany, and of course we have the European Commissioner and then the Secretary General of NATO. This is what Trump had to stare at. Trump wanted to bully Zelensky and try and get Zelensky to agree to surrender the rest of Donetsk, but these European leaders were going to say, no, you can't do that. You have to defend international law. You have to defend our democratic ally against the aggressor, an internationally wanted war criminal who has killed millions of people over the last 26 years. So Trump more or less chickened out, and the meeting went well. Zelensky knew Ukraine won't repeat past mistakes as he meets Trump in the White House once again. So here's the picture. It went very well because Zelensky did not argue with Trump, did not challenge Trump, and just let Trump say and do whatever he wanted. And Zelensky had a pretty smart move to start the meeting. Melania Trump wrote a letter to Putin about protecting children. So this is a soft spot for any man, their wife, and Zelensky knew this, so this is what he said. I want to thank the First Lady of the United States, Melania Trump, for her attention to one of the most painful and difficult issues of this war, the abduction of Ukrainian children by Russia. We deeply appreciate her compassion and her letter to Vladimir Putin. So this is how the meeting started. They sat down and Zelensky immediately thanked Trump for his wife and then gave him a letter. So let's play the clip together.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. If I can, first of all, thank you for invitation and thank you very much for your efforts, personal efforts to stop killings and stop this war. Thank you. And using this opportunity, many thanks to your wife, First Lady of the United States. She sent a letter to Putin about our children, adopted children, and my wife, she, First Lady of Ukraine. She gave the letter. It's not to you, to your wife.
Oh, I want it.
Yeah. So we are saying this sensitive topic. Yeah. Yes, please. And thanks to our partners and that you supported this format. That after our meeting we can have leaders who are around us, UK and France, Germany, Italy, Finland, EU, NATO. I mean all partners around Ukraine supporting us. Thanks to them and thank you very much for invitation.
Thank you very much for being here.
Zelensky probably said thank you about 46 times, and J.D. Vance kept his mouth shut. But last time Trump said you don't have the cards, and Zelensky literally showed up to this meeting with a card for Trump's wife. So that was pretty funny. The entire interaction, the one-on-one, was only 30 minutes. I'll link it down below, and nothing was announced. Nothing was decided. There was no purpose to this meeting. Trump actually spent half the time complaining about crime in D.C. He wants to end mail-in ballots, and he's upset he never gets credit for solving 6 wars in 6 months. He just rambles and complains and cries about how the world is so unfair to him. And Zelensky knew just to sit there, just let Donald Trump cry his eyes out and complain about whatever he wants to complain about. I'll link it down below. This meeting served no purpose. Nothing was announced. Nothing was decided. U.S. journalist apologizes to Zelensky after the February suit controversy sparked in the Oval Office. This is Brian Glenn. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend. And once again, he was in the Oval Office, allowed to ask questions. He's the one that complained that Zelensky wasn't wearing a suit, and this time, Zelensky did wear a suit. This is the black suit that Zelensky wore to Pope Francis's funeral, and this is a good compromise. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have died, been murdered by the Russians the last 3.5 years. So yes, Zelensky is going to wear a black suit in mourning for his nation and his people. But Trump liked the suit. It looks good, so not a problem. With that said, there were still obvious plants in the White House trying to cause trouble. This is Ducey asking Zelensky the insanely loaded question. I'm not going to play the clip, I'll link it down below, but this is the question. Are you prepared to keep sending Ukrainian troops to their deaths for another couple years? Or are you going to agree to redraw the maps? This Ducey guy was a plant. This question was supposed to trigger Zelensky, and then either J.D. Vance or Trump could then start yelling at him. But Zelensky just bobbed and weaved. He dodged all the bullets because he knew what they were trying to do. And it didn't work. Trump says he and Putin largely agreed on land swaps and security guarantees for Ukraine. Once again, from the Alaska summit, but this is all nonsense. Everything that Donald Trump is saying is an exaggeration at best, or an outright lie. Putin and the Russians have not agreed to anything, whether it be security guarantees or land swaps. They'll say things, but they don't actually mean it, or they're trying to be ambiguous so Donald Trump can just interpret it however he wants. So Trump had a giant map printed out in which he's trying to explain to Zelensky, if you just give up Donetsk, then this war can be over forever. Peace in our time. Let's appease the dictator who invaded your country. And Zelensky's not going to say no. Zelensky has been dancing around Trump saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval, or I have to see what my people will say, or, you know, the military is going to have to be consulted. If you just don't tell Trump no, then he thinks he's making progress, and he's happy with you, even when, no, Ukraine and their military are never going to willingly surrender Sloviansk and Kramatorsk. These are cities of over 100 and 150,000 people who still live there. Additionally, this is an important distinction from Timothy Schneider. The phrase land swap is being used to mean Ukraine concedes land illegally occupied by Russia and also concedes territory that is not even occupied. That is not a swap. Everyone using the phrase land swap should please specify which Russian territory Ukraine would be getting. So far, it's a euphemism for forcing Ukraine to give things up to Russia. What is Russia giving up? Bryansk? Kursk? Rostov-on-Don? Russia would never be willing to give up any of their sovereign territory. Additionally, they've already said they're not giving up any of Zaporizhia or Kherson. There is no land swap. Trump is lying. He made it up. There's no deal. What about the security guarantees offered by the Russians? And Witkoff is saying that Russia will legally enshrine in their constitution a commitment to not attack other countries or territories and violate their sovereignty. Oh, really? You're going to amend your constitution, Russia? That's cute. In the Russian constitution, they have term limits. I think they have freedom of speech. Like, there's a lot of stuff in the Russian constitution that Putin doesn't believe in or respect. So yes, even if the Russians amended their constitution to say they would never invade another country, that's laughable. Here's the list of all the countries that the Russians have attacked the last 100 years. Ukraine multiple times, Poland multiple times, Azerbaijan, Georgia multiple times, Finland multiple times, the Baltic countries multiple times, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Afghanistan, Chechnya, Syria. The Russians have killed a lot of people in wars of aggression to expand their borders and grow their empire. Putin is just doing a continuation of what the Russians have been doing really for over 500 years. Here's the peace treaty being signed by Russian President Boris Yeltsin with the leader of Chechnya. Peace in our time. Chechnya has their independence. And the Russians just waited 3 years and went back and destroyed Grozny, killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. They leveled everything to subjugate their people and expand their empire. Same is true in Georgia. Same is true in Ukraine today. The only agreements that the Russians have actually adhered to in the last century is the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Seriously, any treaty or agreements that the Russians have signed with anyone, they have violated except for the deal they made with the Nazis to invade Poland. And that's because the Nazis betrayed them first, before they had a chance. In addition, there's all this talk this week about security guarantees from Ukraine, and once again, Trump is either lying or exaggerating. The Russians are not okay with this. The Russians want all military aid sent to Ukraine to stop, and they want the Ukrainian military to completely demilitarize, to go down to like less than 80,000 soldiers total. Moscow put out a statement correcting Trump. We reaffirm our repeatedly stated position on our categorical rejection of any scenarios that envisage the appearance in Ukraine of a military contingent with the participation of NATO countries. This is Russia's red line. No NATO forces ever are allowed to be deployed to Ukraine to help protect Ukraine. This won't end the war. There are no security guarantees. Donald Trump is just making stuff up. Additionally, as far as signing agreements, we already have one with Russia. It's called the Budapest Memorandum. It was signed by the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom to reaffirm their commitment to Ukraine, in accordance with the principles of the final act of the Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, to respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine. This is what the United States promised Ukraine, this is what the United Kingdom promised Ukraine, and this is what Russia promised Ukraine. And this agreement is worthless. There are no agreements, there are no security guarantees. There is no nation willing to help Ukraine militarily fight off the Russians today. No European country, no NATO country has sent their military to Ukraine to help them fight. There are no security guarantees from our allies. So what would change in the future? If Russia froze the conflict, stopped attacking Ukraine, and then a piece of paper was signed, as soon as Russia attacked again, it wouldn't be respected. If nobody in Europe, if the United States, if Canada, we'll just include all the democratic nations, if nobody militarily is willing to go to Ukraine to help Ukraine fight Russia today, then they're not going to be willing to do it in 3 years. They're not going to be willing to do it in 5 years if there is a freeze in the conflict and then Russia chooses to start again. Russia has 6,000 nuclear weapons, and they threaten to nuke London, nuke Berlin, and nuke Paris almost every single day on Kremlin state TV. So the only deterrent, the only security guarantee for Ukraine is for Ukraine to have a strong military. Ukraine needs more weapons. They need more systems. They need more brigades. They need a larger military. That is the only effective deterrent and the only security guarantee Ukraine will ever have. Trump drops Ukraine's ceasefire demand after Putin. For 8 months, Trump has been demanding a ceasefire, threatening sanctions, threatening tariffs. 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 50 days, 2 more weeks, now 3 more weeks. Trump's given up because the Russians just tell him no. You can just tell Trump no on anything. He doesn't like it, but when you tell him no, if he then tells his supporters, I was told no, that makes him look weak, and he doesn't like looking weak. So he then just says, I changed my mind, I never really wanted a ceasefire. Ceasefires aren't important. When the real reason is the Russians told him no, and that makes him look weak. Death toll from Russian attack on residential area in Kharkiv rises to 5, including a toddler and a teenager. Russia's never going to stop bombing civilians. And Trump doesn't want to put sanctions on his best friend, Vladimir Putin. And the Russians aren't going to stop. They're going to keep targeting civilians. They're going to keep blowing up churches and hospitals and schools and universities. They're going to continue targeting and killing women and children. This is a genocide. If the people living on Ukraine's territory are not willing to call themselves Russian, then they will be exterminated. That's the definition of a genocide. To conduct indefinitely long talks for a peace treaty amid ongoing full-scale hostilities, without even a ceasefire, is such a historical nonsense that only someone trying to buy time to keep the war going could propose it. And only a complete idiot, blind to what is happening and where he stands, could think it's a brilliant plan. The Russians told Trump no, and he's just giving up. Trump says plans underway for a Putin-Zelensky meeting following White House talks. Yeah, I don't think this is going to happen. Once again, the Russians are just lying to Trump and trying to believe that he's making progress, and Trump is so eager to show his supporters he's getting results, he just says things that aren't true. I am struggling to envision why Putin would want to be in the same room as Zelensky. I see the opportunity for Zelensky. Zelensky would love to get in the same room as Putin and tell him off. Say to his face, I'm going to crush your military and make you pay for all the people you've killed really over the last 10 years. What does Putin gain from a face-to-face meeting when Putin has no intention of stopping this war? So Trump said, at the conclusion of the meetings, I called President Putin and began the arrangements for a meeting at a location to be determined between President Putin and President Zelensky after that meeting takes place, we will have a trilateral, which would be the two presidents plus myself. What is Russia demanding? And they're demanding that President Zelensky come to Moscow for this face-to-face meeting. Do you really think the real Putin is going to leave his bunker when Ukrainian intelligence is trying to assassinate him? And the Russians are trying to assassinate President Zelensky. They have failed numerous times over the last 3.5 years. So Trump is delusional that if he can just get these two to be in the same room, they'll become best friends. You know, we can all get along, make some deals, make some money. When these people are trying to kill each other. So no, the Russians are going to say, of course, Putin is willing to meet Zelensky if our conditions are met, and then they give unrealistic conditions, so it's Ukraine's fault that the meeting doesn't take place. This is the dumbest game ever in the history of global affairs. And it's because of one man who is a complete idiot, who is outclassed by everyone in the room by intelligence. But because he is the leader of the world's largest economy and the world's most powerful military, you have absurd scenes such as this. This is the 30-minute meeting with all the European leaders and Trump. I watched it, and honestly, when it was over, I felt like I had brain damage. It's so embarrassing, guys, that the leader of nations, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, they have to sit at this table and kiss this man's ass. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you so much. Only you are capable of bringing these people together. We're so close to peace because of your efforts. Thank you, Mr. Trump. Only you were capable of doing this. These European leaders were willing to say this nonsense because they want to help Ukraine. They're doing this for Zelensky. They're doing this for Ukraine. Also for the security of their own continent. But what this entire gathering and meeting was about was not pissing off Trump so he doesn't cut off weapon supplies. Right now, the only help that Trump is giving is selling weapons to Europe for a profit. Trump is an arms dealer, willing to sell weapons for profit to Europe so they can defend themselves. I'll link this video down below. I mean, you can watch it. Serves no purpose other than to stroke this man's ego and make him feel special because he's such a big boy. These are the leaders of nations. Here is the president of France having to stand there and pretend like he's impressed with Donald Trump's White House hat collection. This is Trump showing a 4 more years hat and a Gulf of America hat. And the president of France, with thousands of years of culture and history, has to stand there and say, "That's an impressive font you chose for your hat, Mr. President." This is where we are, guys. This is where we are. Here's an analysis from Paul Mason. We in Europe have to draw one strategic conclusion. The USA is no longer a reliable or predictable ally. The leaders saw it with full clarity. We in civil society need to understand how deep the crisis is. No state is either safe or secure from territorial breakup. The fundamental problem here is that Trump does not believe in international law. He does not believe in the sovereignty of nation or the inviolability of borders. For Russia to invade Ukraine as a stronger country, that makes sense to Trump. Redraw the maps, might is right. Trump wants to take the Panama Canal. He wants to steal Greenland's resources. He wants to make Canada the 51st state by economic coercion. So Trump has the same mindset and mentality of Putin and Xi. And nobody in Europe is safe. No democratic nation is safe. Really, no nation is safe because borders no longer matter. If you have nuclear weapons, you can invade your neighbor, kill them, take their stuff, and redraw the maps. She believes this, Putin believes this, and Trump believes this. We got serious problems, guys. Here's Jessica Berlin. Europe is sighing with relief that Trump mostly behaved himself so far. They shouldn't. Ignore what he says, whether it's crazy or sane. His words don't matter. He backtracks constantly. Judge only what he does to help Ukraine or punish Russia. And don't wait for him. Act now. Maybe I have to say this in every video, but nobody's going to help you, Europe. Nobody's going to help you. You have to help Ukraine defeat the Russians today. Otherwise, things will only get worse a year from now, 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. But let's go back to the Alaska summit and get more of Russia's reaction. Russia's pro-war bloggers see humiliation in the Putin-Trump summit. Trump and Putin, holding hands, walked down that red carpet together as friends. And this was a propaganda win for the Russians, seeing the President of the United States, who's supposed to be the leader of the free world, completely embarrassing himself. Trump got nothing for this meeting. The Russians agreed to nothing. Russian media shows U.S. armored vehicle with a Russian and American flag storming Ukrainian positions. So after this summit, in which Putin was allowed to go to Alaska and flex his muscles, yeah, this was a huge morale boost for Russian soldiers on the front lines. And here they are, attacking Ukrainian positions, proudly flying the Russian and the American flag together. They're doing this just to demoralize people. The Russians hate America. Let's just be honest here. American weapons in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers have killed hundreds of thousands of uniformed Russian soldiers the last 3.5 years. I don't think the Russian people are ever going to forgive that or get over that. But if they know they can demoralize Ukraine by saying America is their ally, then they'll do stuff like this, just to mess with us. But this is what they're saying on Kremlin State TV. Here's the latest clip from Russia Media Monitor. Alexander Gernov named Putin's victories in the Alaska summit. The entire clip is 13 minutes. I'll link it down below. And for 13 minutes, they just make fun of Trump and talk about how much Putin dominated him at this summit in Alaska. Here's a little bit of what they were saying. Now, Putin's next victory, aside from the handshake, Trump got scared. Look, at first they wanted it to be a one-on-one meeting, followed by lunch, and then 5-on-5. But all American and European newspapers were writing that Putin will do him in, so to speak. With his level of preparation, with his level of intellect, with his level of political intuition, political bravery, and an ability to be diplomatic, there is hardly a match for Putin. Well, maybe Xi Jinping. That's why Trump got scared that he will be bent over. This is the Russians saying that Trump would get sodomized, figuratively, if he was allowed to meet with Putin one-on-one. Instead, they decided on a 3-on-3. We've outlined our position once again. As we know, it hasn't changed in 3 years and hasn't even moved one step. From those scarce words Putin has uttered in starting a special military operation, this was yet another victory for Putin, who did not move from his position, not one step, showing everyone that he isn't playing games and that he needs exactly what he needs. This is the Russians on Kremlin State TV saying they've not budged an inch. They've conceded nothing. They have agreed to nothing. Ukraine can cede all land they want and completely demilitarize, probably regime change in Kyiv. That's been their demands for 3.5 years. And Trump talking to them, Trump meeting with them, has changed nothing. This is what the Russians say. So concerning Ukraine, the last couple of weeks, these air attacks have been moderate. They're still bad, but Russia's no longer sending 500, 600, 700 a night. They're sending 100, 200, and 300. Because Trump is engaging in these talks, Russia's still producing probably about 500 of these Shahed drones a day, and they're stockpiling. They're building them up. They're using this time as negotiations to build new fortifications and launching areas to make these drone attacks be massive. This potentially is what is coming once Trump gets bored and gives up, and these negotiations and talks just end. Russia will start launching 1,000 drones a night against civilian cities. That's my prediction. I hope it doesn't happen. We need Ukraine to first have a breakthrough that prevents this, but Ukraine's doing the best they can. They hit another fuel car. This was in the Zaporizhia region. And I think Ukraine is obviously monitoring this rail track, and anytime Russia tries to deliver fuel to Kherson and Zaporizhia, I mean, this is an easy target. You just have to get the front car, and once the entire train is on fire, send in more drones and finish it off. I'll link the videos down below if you want to see what all these fuel cars on fire look like. Other strikes. A direct drone strike lit up the Lysky rail station. Russia confirms train delays across their southern network. More pictures and videos of Ukraine going after Russia's rail networks. This does effectively slow the Russians down and makes frontline soldiers have less to fight with. Volgograd refinery goes up in smoke again 2 days after a major drone strike. Did Ukraine just strike it again? Potentially, or this refinery caught fire because it's badly damaged. This is the Rosneft refinery in Syzran, as well as the Lukoil refinery in Volgograd, and Ukraine successfully struck these over the last 2 weeks, and they're completely shut down. They're no longer operational. Ukraine's strike disrupts oil supplies to 3 EU countries still purchasing Russian oil. This is Hungary, the Czech Republic, and Slovakia. And initially I thought this Druzhba pipeline was damaged, but I thought the Russians could fix it quickly. And they can't. Ukraine successfully took out a pumping station, and the pipeline is entirely shut down. And this is not an easy fix. This pipeline is going to be down for weeks or months, meaning these Central European nations can no longer buy Russian oil. I do want to say they've had 3.5 years to find an alternative, so Ukraine doesn't feel too sorry they can't buy Russian oil anymore through this pipeline. Ukraine hit a Russian convoy in Kursk. A deputy commander of Moscow's North Group lost an arm and a leg. This was a HIMARS strike. This Russian general was the deputy commander of the Northern Group forces, and I'm guessing he's not going to be able to continue his duties now that he's missing an arm and a leg. Ukraine's Flamingo missile is for blasting Russian factories. Ukraine has a new cruise missile. It may be one of the hardest hitting in the world. Ukraine wanted to announce this probably in relation to all of these summits in Alaska and DC, but this is now in serial production. It has a range of 3,000 kilometers. This cruise missile is going to be capable of striking 70 of Russia's 90 air bases. Here's the range of where this missile can go, and I think the Germans might have had a little bit to do with this design and helping accelerate their production rates, but since Germany is not going to provide Taurus cruise missiles, this is their alternative. If we can start mass producing these and getting these to the front lines, yeah, Russia's going to feel this. It's going to be a bad week once these start being deployed. This is a test launch. Ukraine wanted to put this video out there, and the event Russia wants to reconsider and actually stop this war, but Putin's not going to do that. So potentially dozens of these cruise missiles are going to be attacking Russian bases in the coming weeks and months. But here's one of the test launches. definitely cruising. We'll see what it can do once it's officially used for the first time. Ukraine gains access to the EU's $1 billion defense contracts. Ukraine transforms from an aid recipient to a partner as the EU opens up $1 billion in defense contracts. We're no longer getting these headlines of what Europe is sending to Ukraine. They're no longer announcing what's being delivered, or I think even announcing the dollar amounts. I'm just not going to have these headlines at the end of the video announcing stuff, because we're no longer announcing stuff. Final video. Once again, I want to thank these European leaders for showing up in Washington, D.C. I understand how disruptive this is. These people are the leaders of their own countries, and they have domestic concerns, but they took the time and they got on the planes to go to D.C. to show their support for Ukraine and Zelensky. So this is a behind-the-scenes video of them gathering. They all met before going to the White House, and this is the clip that Zelensky shared.
Hi, Ursula.
Good to see you. Again?
How was
This time in
flight?
Washington. Good. Your flight was good too?
Thank you so much. I said that you just war movie.
Thank you for continuing to support Ukraine. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.